I stayed at your door all week and this time you left the light on. Last week you finally paid the fence off. Add the waves while their minus signs still breathe, then square the total, and on your way out you pressed one more coin into my hand and told me not to spend it. The negative, you said, was a clock hand pointing straight down. 1 hour on a dial I'd not been shown. And then, next week, the little clocks. Well, it's next week.
It is, and I've been keen to open this one since I shut the last. So take that coin out and turn it over properly. The amplitude was never a plain number wearing a plus or a minus like a change of mood. It's an arrow, a length, and a way it points. A clock hand stopped at some hour of the dial. Last week, you met a single hour of it. Tonight, the face.
You even sketched the shape of it at the very threshold, right before you left. 2 clock hands, you said, added tip to tail, and whether they build or cancel comes down to which way each one points. I've turned that over so often the words have gone smooth in my pocket.
Then we're not starting from cold, which suits me. I flashed you the last frame before the rest of the reel. The way you show a film's final shot to make the middle matter.
Well, it worked on me. I've a picture I can't work and a week of failing to. So wind it back and build every step up to that frame until tip to tail isn't a slogan I'm parroting, but a machine I can turn in my own 2 hands. Where do we take the first turn?
There's a list of demands loading behind your teeth. I can see it forming. Fence off what you're keeping, and I'll tell you which pegs still hold.
Add then square stays. Bourne's squaring stays. The barred bands stay. And you gave me your word at the door. The negative survives, a true corner of the bigger thing, not a lie you mean to walk back on. Is all of that still good this morning, in the cold light?
Every peg holds, and nothing you carried out last week gets set down tonight. The negative is one heading of the arrow, straight backwards, a half turn round the dial from pointing dead ahead. That's what minus ever was, not a smaller-than-nothing quantity, some debt the number owed. A hand spun round to face the other way.
So minus was never a mood the number sank into. It was a direction all along, and I met it because it happened to point back the road I came.
One heading out of a full dial's worth. Hold that firmly and let me widen the picture around it.
Careful, you've had the arrow out of its box barely a minute and handed me 2 pictures that don't sit flush. Last week the hand pointed up for a crest, down for a trough. This morning it's forward and backward. Which is the real dial, up and down or round a clock? I can't carry both without knowing which is the shadow.
The clock face is the true one. Up and down was only the flattened shadow it threw. Picture the hand free to swing all the way round the face. Noon, 3, 6, 9, and every hour smeared between. And a clock is the right dial for it, mind. A hand doesn't rattle between up and down. It glides round and comes home, round and comes home, which is the very manner the thing has as the electron flies. Last week I let it stop at 2 hours and no more, because that pair carried the fence.
And tonight you unlock the rest of the dial. So every direction the hand can point is a genuine amplitude, not a handful of blessed special ones, the lot of them. 4:30, 20 to 9, all the smooth country between. And I'd been squinting at the 2 instants it pointed dead up or dead down, calling those the only readings the thing could give.
When there was a face you were never let look at. And feel what the arrow is holding at any 1 hour, because it's 2 facts at once, not one. How long the hand reaches and which hour it aims at. 2 readings sitting on every spot on that wall, where last week you thought there was a single, lonely height.
Go on then, name them, because I can feel myself wanting to smear the 2 together into one number. And I've learned this week the smearing is the sin you're always catching me at.
The length of the hand, call it the size of the amplitude, how much this spot leans toward the odds. And the hour it points to, call it the phase, pure direction, no size in it at all. Size and phase.
One for how much, one for which way. And this size, the reach of the hand, it's just last week's crest height in a new coat, is it? Nothing more than the tall or short I already had.
Nothing changed there. The reach is exactly what it always was. The hour is the sole newcomer. One says how much, the other which way round the dial. Keep the pair apart in your head, and half the confusion of this subject never comes to call.
Size and phase kept apart or drowned. But here's my first worry, and it's a proper big one. You spent last week welding Born into my skull till it's set. Square the height, out drops the chance. Now the amplitude's quietly grown a second reading. Does the squaring still run? Or have you cracked the one rule I bled a fortnight for?
Settle that fear before we take another step. Nothing's broken. To get the odds, you take the arrow's length and square it, and that alone. The direction the hand points plays no part in the squaring. Born never asks after it. A hand at noon and a hand of the same reach at 6 square to the identical chance.
So Born reads the length and is stone blind to the hour, which is why last week came out so clean under my hands. My crest and my trough, up hand and down hand, squaring to the same brightness. Same reach, opposite hours, and the squaring hadn't the eyes to tell them apart.
That's why your deep trough blazed as bright as your tall crest, though last week neither of us said why. The squaring keeps the reach and bins the hour.
So a lone electron with no second road to argue with, its odds come out smooth and featureless, no stripe anywhere, because there's no other hour on hand to disagree with.
Just so, a single arrow, all on its own, squares to a plain, dull chance, the same whichever hour it happens to hold. It has nobody on the wall to argue with. You need 2 at the least before the phase can bite. Which sharpens the question I want from you. If Born can't so much as see the hour, what on earth is the direction for?
That is exactly what I was winding up to demand. If I can never read the phase off the wall, every dot a squared reach with the hour already binned, then the direction's a passenger, riding along, doing no work I can watch. So it's an ornament you've hung on for show, or it earns its keep somewhere I've not been shown. Which of the two?
The second of the two. And you stood in that very room last week watching it work, without once seeing it stir. The hour does nothing to a lone arrow's odds. Their Born rules, and the phase stays mute. But the instant 2 arrows land on one spot, and you must combine them, the hour decides everything. Silent alone, decisive in company.
Then do the adding in front of me, since that's plainly the moment of truth. Last week you had me adding heights, and I thought nothing of it. A crest and a crest to a taller crest, a crest and a trough to flat nothing. If those heights were arrows in disguise, adding must have meant something richer than stacking 2 numbers, and I sailed straight past it.
You did, and here's why. I kept the hands dead up and dead down, where stacking looked like the schoolroom sums you already trusted. Let the hands go slantwise, off to any hour they please, and that trick fails you on the spot.
So how do you actually add 2 arrows when they're free to point any hour? Not by laying their 2 lengths end to end and calling the total a sum, surely. A hand has a direction to answer for.
There's one clean way, and it's the tip to tail you've carried since the door. Take the first arrow as it lies. Start the second from where the first one ends, its tail pinned to the first one's tip, still pointing its own stubborn hour. Then draw a fresh arrow, from the very start to the very finish, straight across the gap.
And the shortcut home, the crow's flight straight across the gap, that's the sum.
Entire and exact, tip to tail, then the straight line across. Now run the pair I drilled into you last week, and let's see it hold.
2 hands, aimed at the same hour, both to noon. I lay the second on the tip of the first, both pointing the one way. So they stretch along a single line, nose to tail to nose. and the arrow home reaches from the far start to the far finish, the length of the two together. Long.
Now square that resultant's length. The same short-sighted squaring as ever. A long arrow squared is a fat chance, a bright band, dots heaping onto the spot till it glows. Two hands agreeing on the hour stack into one tall arrow, and Bourne reads it bright.
So there are my two crests from last week, only now I can say why they built. Not both of them happened to be up, both pointing the same hour, so laid tip to tail, they run out long.
Exactly so. Laid the same way, nose to tail, they run out long and the spot heaps up bright. Now do the dark one, the one that used to spook you.
Two hands at opposite hours, one to noon, one to 6. I pin the second's tail to the first's tip, but it aims straight back down the road I came, so it walks me back toward the start, and the arrow home is short, a stub, near enough nothing if the two are matched in reach.
And if the reaches match, home is the very spot you set out from. No arrow left standing, square that, nothing multiplied by its own nothing, a barred spot, a dark band. There's your cancelling, made exact.
Not the vague old, a crest met a trough and the two wiped out.
But two hands at opposite hours, added true, tip to tail, marching you back to where you began, and leaving no reach behind to square. That's the same dark band, said properly at last.
But now I want the ones you never showed me last week, the in-between. Suppose one hand points to noon and the other to 3, a quarter turn apart, square across, not agreeing and not opposing. I pin them tip to tail. They don't line up long and they don't fold to nothing, so the arrow home is some middling thing off on the slant.
Precisely that. Pinned at a right angle, the shortcut home cuts across the corner, longer than a stub, shorter than the two laid straight. Square that middling reach and you get a middling chance, a half-lit band, neither blazing nor barred.
So every hour of disagreement between full agreement and full opposition hands me its own in-between arrow, its own in-between glow.
1 grade for every hour of it, a quiet ladder of them running all the way between bright and barred. And there's your fence, top to bottom, in a single rule.
Let me say it back then. Bright, barred, and every grade of half-lit smear between, nothing more than 2 clock hands laid tip to tail, and how far the arrow home reaches once they're done arguing. Same hour, long and bright. Opposite hour, a stub and dark. Quarter turn, a middling glow. That's a good deal tidier than the mournful striped business I dragged in last week.
The wall, red hour by hour across it. Where the two roads' hands arrive agreeing, the resultant runs long and the spot blazes. Where they arrive opposed, it shrinks to a stub and goes dark.
And as I slide my eye along, the two hands must drift in and out of agreement, together, opposed, together. So the arrow home swells and shrinks the length of the wall.
And the squared reach paints it bright, barred, bright, barred, evenly the length of the wall. You've got it.
And I need to be dead sure of one thing before we go on. This is the same fence, not a new one smuggled in under cover of dark. Last week's add the heights then square and this morning's add the arrows then square are one machine. Last week I worked it with an eye shut, catching the hands only when they pointed dead up or dead down.
The very same works now with both eyes. Up and down were 2 hours on a face you couldn't see the rest of. The rule never shifted a hair. Add first, keep every hand raw and able to cancel. Square the finished total last.
And all you did was let the hands aim anywhere, not at noon and 6 alone.
And the moment they're free to swing, the striped business turns simpler under your fingers, not stranger.
I'll take your word for that once I've felt it. But let me lodge a grumble first because it's owed. You've handed me a richer object, a hand that swings to any hour, and told me in the same breath the wall can never show me that hour, since the squaring bins it before the light reaches my eye. So I've more to track and less to look at. That's not felt like a bargain.
A fair grumble, and here's the down payment against it. You gain the thing last week could never give, a reason. Last week you knew that a spot went dark. You couldn't say why that spot and not its neighbour a finger over. Now the dark spot is simply where the two hands come in, aimed opposite ways. The pattern stops being a fact to memorize and becomes a thing you read.
Then cash one old debt with it before you move on, because this one's itched since last week. The far slit, the one nobody sent an electron through, reaching across the room to darken a spot that would have shone. In arrows now, in hours and hands. What did that idle second door actually do?
It laid down a second hand. The far road is the longer hall, so its clock wound a half-turn further round than the near roads, and its hand arrived pointing the opposite hour. Add the two tip to tail, near hand forward, far hand back, and they fold to a stub. Square the stub, and the spot is barred.
So the far slit never touched the electron. It sent an arrow that happened to point the other way, and the two cancelled. The thing I openly gawped at, that opening a second door could darken a room, comes down to two clock hands disagreeing about the hour. That's nearly tidy enough to make me suspicious.
Doubt it all you please. It survives the squint. Now read me the thing you actually came for. I can see it cued behind your teeth.
You keep saying the two hands arrive pointing this way or that, calm, as if a clerk had gone round in advance, setting each one by hand. Who does the setting? When the electron leaves the slit, what decides which hour its hand shows landing over here, against the different hour it shows landing a finger over there?
The journey does it. The travelling itself, and nothing outside it. Picture the hand not frozen, but turning as it goes, winding round the dial while the electron crosses. It sets out at some hour, and as it goes the hand sweeps round, and wherever it's aimed at the instant the electron arrives, that's the hour it lays down on the spot.
So it's a stopwatch riding the electron, and where the second hand stands when it lands is the phase.
Read off at the finish line, exactly. The stopwatch stops, and the hour it shows is the phase. Now push it the next step yourself.
Then two different roads to the same spot. The short hop through the near slit, the long way round through the far one. Run their stopwatches for different amounts and stop them on different hours. And that gap between the 2 hours is the whole of why they agree or fight when I add them.
You've built the fence from underneath, in one breath. Matched roads, clocks landing together, a long arrow, a bright band. One road running a half-turn further, hands opposed, a stub, a dark band.
And it's a whole row of them marching down the wall, not the one stripe. Because as I walk my eye along, the far clock keeps lapping the near one, in step, half out, in step again, over and over.
Lap after lap, the length of the wall. The far clock keeps gaining on the near one, stripe by stripe, and every full turn it steals off it buys you one more bright band, and one more barred beside it. That's the whole marching row. 2 clocks drifting in and out of step, printed out evenly, all the way across, till the wall runs clean out of room.
Then I've a rude question I can't hold in. How fast does the hand turn? Because if I knew the rate, I could sit with a pencil and work out every hour on every road myself, and never trouble you again. What sets the winding? The electron speed, the length of the road, some third thing I've not met.
Here's where I lay a hand flat on the table and tell you plainly what I'm doing. The rate that hand winds along a road is set by a quantity you already own outright. From the mechanics course, mind, not this one. The action, that summed-up number you chased the length of the ghostly fan of arcs. Motion energy take away place energy, tallied instant by instant along the road.
Stop! Stop right there. The flat path number from the mechanics nights, the one the ball made as small as it would go, that is what's turning this clock hand. You're telling me my 2 courses have been shaking hands behind my back this while, and neither thought to mention it to me?
Palms pressed together the entire course, and not a word of warning from either side. You'll feel the full grip of it before the night's out. Say it back simply. The more action a road piles up, the further round the dial its hand has wound by the finish.
Big action, many turns of the hand. Small action, few. Fine, I can hold that, but you can't drop the action on the table and stroll off whistling. How much action does it take to wind the hand once clean round the face? A single full turn?
It's pinned against a fantastically tiny natural unit, a grain size nature keeps in her own pocket and shares with no one. Pile up that 1 grain's worth of action along a road, and the hand has turned once round the dial. Which is why, for anything as fat as a ball, the hand whirls round an uncountable number of times over the shortest hop, turn upon turn without end, for a single stride of a thrown stone. Keep that warm. It's the reason you've never once caught a cricket ball shimmering on its way to the bat.
And that tiny unit, I'll wager, is the next sheet you've no intention of lifting for me tonight.
That, and the exact law of the winding, is the engine I leave under its sheet this evening. Why nature keeps a clock at all, why she winds it against that particular grain and no other, I can gesture toward it and no step further. What I hand you whole and working is the shape. The action turns the hand, and how far it's turned decides the hour it lands on.
Another covered car for the garage then, naturally. I'm collecting them like a man with a shed full of the things. Schrodinger's rule for how the wave rolls under one, the collapse under another, and now the rate of your little clock under a third. Fine, I'll not tug the sheet, but hand me the shape to fly on, since you keep dangling it past my reach.
It's all you need to leave the ground, and you've nearly got it. Each road runs its own clock. The action turns the hand, and where 2 clocks land, side by side, decides bright or dark. And notice what that plain shape already buys. The why that spot, and not its neighbour, you were owed a moment back.
Settle up then. Why does one spot go dark and the next one over blaze?
Because the 2 roads that reach it wound their clocks to opposite hours. The far road spent a half turn's more action than the near, so its hand came in reversed, and the pair cancelled to a stub. Hear the shape of that sentence, because everything tonight turns on it. The action never shoves the electron off its course. It winds the clock the electron is carrying.
That line's going to keep me up half the night. The action doesn't shove, it winds the clock. Because in the mechanics course, the action always felt like a bookkeeper's grand total, a price stitched onto a path, a figure that admired itself in the ledger and went home and did nothing to anybody. A dead number in a dead column, the driest thing in the subject, and you've gone and set it spinning on the front of every electron in the room.
And now that same price is a turning. A hand going round, out here where you can watch it carve dark bands into a wall with your own eyes.
The ledger's grown hands. That's going on the wall over my desk.
Keep it there, and keep it close. Up in the big, slow world, the action was a figure you totted in a column and filed. Down where the electron lives, it's the angle of a spinning clock, and the spinning is the thing that interferes. One quantity wearing 2 faces, a dry sum in the mechanics room, a live turning hand down here.
One quantity, 2 lives. A bloodless figure filed in a column upstairs, and a hand spinning fast on the electron down here. Right, so 2 slits, 2 roads, 2 clocks. I've got the pair held firm in both hands, but take the slits clean away. The electron in open air, crossing an empty room, nothing to pass through. How many roads then? There aren't 2 gaps to choose between. There's, what? The one, the straight shot across.
Guess boldly, and let's see how far off you land.
The straight shot, the one sensible line from here to there. That's my best guess. Unless you're winding up in that way you have to do something to me I'm not going to enjoy.
Winding up to exactly that. And it's the leap the mechanics course cracked a door onto and then slammed. Ask how the electron gets from start to finish across that empty room, and the honest answer isn't the straight shot, and it isn't 2 roads. It's every road, every conceivable path from here to there, all at once, each carrying its own little clock, each wound its own amount by its own road's action.
All of them? No, listen back to what you just said out loud. Every path from here to there. That takes in the sensible straight line, grand, but it also takes in the road that loops out to the moon and ambles back for tea. The one that spells my name in the air on the way. The absurd ones, the scenic detours, the lunatic sightseeing tour of the cosmos. You're telling me the electron takes all of those?
Every last one, and I'll not soften a single one for your comfort. The moon loop, the name spelling, the dead slow crawl and the frantic sprint. The one that dawdles a year and the one that's there and gone in an eye blink. Every path a pencil could draw from start to finish, each one real, each one carrying its faithfully ticking clock.
Even the ones that set off the wrong way entirely, that bolt for the far wall first, away from the finish, before doubling back.
Those too. The ones that set off fleeing the finish and think better of it halfway. No path is too foolish to be counted in. This is the ghostly fan you once had hanging over your living room floor in the mechanics course. Except now every arc in it holds a spinning hand.
But this is worse than the mechanics fan, and you know it. There you drew the ghost arcs and swore blind that only one lit up, the flat one, and the rest stayed ghosts, chalk lines I'd sketched for an argument. Now you're telling me they don't stay ghosts. Everyone is real, everyone taken, everyone carries a live clock. The whole preposterous fan switched full on at once.
That's the leap, and I'll not dress it gentler. Every last clock running at once. The true amplitude to get from start to finish is the sum of one clock arrow for every last path there is, added the one honest way we know, tip to tail, all of them. The moon loop's hand, and the straight shot's hand, and every madness stacked between, strung end to end, into a single arrow home.
But hang on, there's a bottomless swarm of the things. A fresh path for every hair you could bend the road by, and you can bend it by less than a hair. You're stringing an endless line of little hands end to end. That ought to wander off into a hopeless snarl, an arrow home that could point any which way and mean nothing. How does an endless heap of clock hands give me one clean answer, and not a plate of grey mush?
Because of what the hours do to one another. Take 2 wild neighbouring roads, the moon loop and that same moon loop nudged over by a hair. Wildly different roads pile up wildly different action, so their 2 clocks wind round to wildly different hours. And so the 2 hands arrive aimed in all different directions.
So the mad roads knife each other clean in the back. The loop to the moon and the loop to the moon, plus an inch, wound their clocks to hours a world apart. So when I add their 2 hands, they fight instead of stacking. And there's a mad neighbour at the elbow of every mad road, each leaning off a different way, so they don't even need vetoing, one at a time.
They cancel each other all through the crowd, so the mob of them curls into a tight little coil that marches nowhere. String 1,000 hands, each aimed at a fresh random hour, tip to tail, and you cross no ground. You spiral into a knot and finish a whisker from where you set out. The wild roads, summed over, come to almost nothing. They shout each other down into silence.
So the electron runs its own opinion poll of the entire universe. It canvasses every ludicrous route there is, moon loops and name spellings and scenic detours without number, and lets every road throw in its clock. And the whole of that babble, all those hours pointing every which way at once, adds up to very nearly nothing at all. All that frantic democracy, and the wild ones outvote one another into a flat, dead heat.
And that near nothing, coming from nearly everywhere, is not waste. It's the working of the machine. The universe is deafeningly loud with roads, and nearly all that noise is each voice drowned dead by the one at its elbow. You've heard this song before, mind. In the mechanics course, the night the ghost arcs shouted themselves into silence. The same hush, only now you can name what's doing the shouting.
Little clocks wound to clashing hours, curling away to nothing. I remember the hush, but everything now hangs on your careful word, nearly. Nearly all cancel, you keep saying. Nearly nothing, from nearly everywhere. Which means there's a somewhere the cancelling fails, some patch of roads whose clocks do not land on clashing hours, that don't coil away but stack up and live. Where is that patch?
The roads where the clock stops changing from one to the next. Think what made the wild ones cancel. A hair's nudge of the road swung the action hugely, so neighbouring clocks landed hours apart. Now go hunting for the place that stops being true. A road you can nudge by a hair, and the action barely stirs. Nudge it, and its clock scarcely moves. So its close neighbours all land on nearly the same hour.
Then their hands all aim nearly the same way. So laid tip to tail, they don't curl away, they run out along a line. They stack. They build a long living arrow instead of a coiled little stub, so that one patch lives clean through the great cancelling, because there, and there alone, the clocks agree instead of quarrelling.
Add, rather than murder each other in the dark. One patch of the fan, where nudging the road leaves the action barely moved, keeps its clocks in step, and that patch alone builds a long resultant arrow that survives to the end. Everywhere else, hush. There, one lone survivor, standing tall. Now, you named that patch yourself, months back in another course, and hadn't a clue what you'd named.
Did I now? Go on then. The patch where the action barely moves when you nudge the road a hair, where jiggling the path doesn't shift the number it carries. That's… wait. That's the flat spot. That's the stationary path. Those are the exact words you flogged into me over a whole miserable night in the mechanics course. The true path is the one where the action goes flat.
Those are the words, letter for letter, and you kept them. Flat means nudging the path doesn't change its number. You said it back to me yourself months ago, and I made you hold both of its names. The friendly one, carved over the door, least action, and the true one underneath, stationary. That flat patch, where the action barely stirs, is exactly where the little clocks fall into step and survive.
It's the real one. The flat path is the actual arc, the one the world lights up, the throw the ball genuinely takes. Newton's own arc curving through the open air. That's the path where the action goes stationary, and you've just told me, to my face, it's the same place all the quantum clocks agree and pile up and survive. The classical path and the surviving path are the same path. Least action was the little clocks agreeing the whole blessed time.
The very same. The one arc the world ever bothers to show you. The ball's true flight, the classical road from the mechanics course, is nothing but the place in the fan where the little clocks stop clashing and heap up. Everywhere else in creation, they cancel to silence. There, and only there, they sing the single clear note. 2 centuries we bowed to least action as a law handed down from on high, and it was a spread of little clocks, agreeing among themselves where the action lay flat the entire time.
So what I was taught to call least action is the sound of that lone survivor ringing.
The sound of that lone survivor ringing. Say why the ball flies its one arc, now, in your own words.
Not because a hand shoves it dutifully along the parabola from behind, because it truly sets out along every road there is. The moon loops, the madness, the sightseeing, all of it at once. And every road but the flat one has its clock knifed clean by a neighbour down to nothing. And the flat one is the single place left where the clocks reinforce. The classical arc is the wreckage left standing after the fan shouts itself hoarse.
Better than my word for it, that. In the mechanics course, I could do no more than crack the door an inch and chalk a name over it. Feynman. Tonight you've walked clean through, coat, boots and all. Least action isn't a private preference, the ball sits nursing.
And it isn't a law standing proud on its own two legs either, is it? It's a shadow. This sum of spinning clocks, throwing one clean shadow up into our big, slow world. And we spent centuries calling the shadow a fundamental law.
The classical path is where the quantum agrees with itself. That's the entire trick.
And it lays to rest the thing that always nagged me raw about least action from the first night. How does the ball know to pick the cheapest arc before it's even left my hand and flown?
Name the answer, since you've plainly got it.
It doesn't. It never knew a thing. It never shops, never sizes up a menu, never sits comparing one route against another. It spreads itself along everything at once, and the comparing happens for free, in the cancelling. Every wasteful road knifed by its own neighbour until the flat one's clocks are all that's left standing to be seen.
The choosing was never a choosing. It was a survival, start to finish. The shopping problem you fought me tooth and nail over for a whole mechanics night answered at last from underneath. No ledger consulted, no menu read, no sums done in mid-air by a startled pebble.
So the universe is a spendthrift and a miser in the one breath. It tries everything there is, every mad detour, and then keeps only the bargain and lets its own extravagance cancel down to nothing. The wildest shopping spree ever thrown, and not a penny spent at the finish.
That's the temperament of it, near enough. Open-handed and tight-fisted in the very same motion. Every road set out together. The clocks settled the arithmetic among themselves. The flat one alone came through the slaughter to be counted.
And out in the big, slow world of thrown balls and wheeling planets, tell me, why do I never catch a whiff of the fan? Why does the ball look for all the world as if it flew one crisp, lonely line? No ghosts, no detours, no cancelling murmur underneath.
Because that grain of nature's clock is so fantastically fine. For anything as fat and slow as a thrown ball, the action piled up along even the shortest hop is stupendous against that grain. So the clocks whirl round furiously, thousands of turns, and the cancelling grows merciless. The survivor comes out razor sharp. One clean arc, the fan's whole roaring extravagance tidied away without a fingerprint.
Not a fingerprint left. And I take it if I shrink down, 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 to the size of the electron, the grain stops being so absurdly small against it. And then the fan starts to show its hand.
Then the fan starts to show its hand. The clocks no longer whirl so madly, the cancelling loosens its grip, and the roads either side of the flat one get their vote back. The crisp, classical arc softens into a spread of live possibility, and the stripes, your beloved stripes, come quietly back to the wall. The fence you mourned is the fan, no longer able to hide at that smaller scale.
Then let me savour one thing before we move an inch, because I've earned this. In the mechanics course, I flung out a joke, the pebble doing its accounts in mid-air, comparison shopping every road before it deigned to fly across my living room, and you let me feel a prize fool for it, a full night's worth. And here you stand, one course later, handing me my own joke back with a straight face and calling it the sober truth. A course I've spent living that jibe down, the man who thought a stone did its sums on the wing, and back it strolls, with more dignity than I ever lent it.
Truer than your joke dared to be, and I mean it plainly. The pebble really does canvass every route. You only had the mechanism stood on its head. It doesn't shop the menu and then choose. It spreads along everything, and all but the one bargain cancels itself away. So you were dead right that it tries everything. You were only wrong that anybody, anywhere, is doing the deciding.
So there's no one at the wheel. The universe works the sum, and the electron doesn't consult the answer, it simply is the sum. But hold hard on one thing, because I want to be certain to my bones. I've not been sold a conjurer's trick dressed in a physicist's coat. You keep saying the clocks settled the arithmetic among themselves. Is that a real thing the electron does, actually set out along every road, or a slick way of landing on the right number?
A fair question, a hard one. And here's the one straight answer I'll give, and then not preach again all night. This is no metaphor I'll be sheepishly walking back next week. The clocks, the added arrows, the sum over every road are a real working way to do the whole of quantum mechanics, Feynman's own, and it hands you the odds to the last decimal. Every road is genuinely taken is the sober content of the thing, not mysticism in fancy dress. The one piece still under the sheet is why the clock whines at the rate it does.
Then the doing is rock underfoot, and only the bottom of the Y left dark. I can stand my full weight on that. It's the plain deal you always cut me. And you let slip there's a second way to skin this. The clocks are Feynman's door in, and parked under one of my garage sheets sits Schrödinger's, the rule for how the wave rolls forward. Are those the same house by different doors, or two houses?
The one house reached two ways, same as the mechanics course had two keys to the one clockwork. Schrödinger's way follows the wave rolling smoothly along, instant to instant, a front advancing. Feynman's way sets out along every road at once and adds up the clocks.
Two ways in, and behind each, the same striped room. So I could have met all of tonight rolling a wave forward instead of counting clocks and fetched up at the identical wall.
To the last dot, yes. A wave rolling or a fan of clocks added, your pick of door. The pair hand you the same odds every time you check. We came in through Feynman's tonight for one reason. It's the door that shows least action falling straight out of the quantum.
One piece of plain housekeeping then before I lose the thread, because all night you've had me adding hands, and I've half let go of the last step. Once I've strung every road's clock tip to tail into that one grand final arrow home, the survivor, the thing left standing, what do I actually do to it, right at the end, to get a chance I can lay a bet on? The same tired old move.
You square its length. That's all it is, not a hair altered. Bourne hasn't shifted an inch since last week, and he isn't going to. Take that final resultant arrow's reach, multiply it once by its own plain self, and out drops the chance of the electron landing on that spot. But mind the order, the one you bled a fortnight for at the slits. Add every road's hand while they can still cancel, and square only the finished arrow, last of all. Reverse it, square each road alone before you add, and you throw away every clock's quarrel with its neighbour, and the striped world with it. Two slits or open sky, that order is the game entire.
Then let me point this shiny new machine at something and see whether it bites back. All night the electron has been this spread of roads, a fan of ticking clocks, not a dot sitting still on a line. So if somebody grabs my sleeve and asks me flat out where the electron is as it crosses the room, one spot, a single honest pin in the map, I've no answer to give them, have I?
What would you say to them, pressed?
I'd have to say the thing isn't at a place. It's smeared over every road at once, and there's no one pin I could push into the map without lying to their face. It's the spread itself, not a point in the spread.
No pin to push while it crosses. The spread, never the point. Which means, where is it hasn't got a sharp answer to give. Not until the instant you reach out and catch it. And now you're standing on the lip of next week's trouble, so let me nudge you the last step. If you wanted to force a sharp answer, pin the electron to very nearly one spot, Think what you'd have to do to that fan of roads.
I'd have to crush it, throw out all the far-flung wandering roads, and keep only a tight little bundle, threading through the one spot I'm stubbornly insisting on. Squeeze the fan down to a needle so there's nowhere else on earth the thing could be. Strangle the wandering right out of it to force an address out at last. That's what pinning it down would cost me, wouldn't it?
Crush the spread to a needle, yes, and there's a sting waiting in that. The rate those clocks wind is knotted tight to how the electron is moving. You cannot prise the two apart. So pin the place hard and the motion smears, but that's next week's whole lesson, and I'll not spend it tonight.
So there's a trade buried right down in the clocks, deeper than any ruler. Sharpen where it sits and how it's moving goes to fog, and it's carved out of this one spread of roads, not a fault in my instruments, nor a smudge I could ever polish off.
Baked into the electron being a spread of clocks in the first place, not a dodge our tools could ever beat, and no cleverness of yours or mine will ever cheat it. But that's the door I'll open next week, and no sooner. Now I'm doing the very thing I scold you for, racing ahead with my hand already on a latch that isn't tonight's to lift.
Consider yourself well and truly hauled back over the threshold. And before you name next week, let me be square about what we have not done tonight, so I don't stroll home whistling and claim more than the evening earned. That's a ritual of ours too. We never once lifted the sheet on why the clock winds at the rate it winds. That's the one bill left standing on the table, isn't it?
Just the one, and no more hiding behind it. Everything else you carry out entire and trust with your full weight. The arrow with its length and its hour, the tip to tail adding, the square at the end, the sum over every road, the flat path where the clocks agree and live. The rate of the winding alone is the deep gear we did no more than gesture toward.
Then that's the one sheet I leave lying where it is, and I can live under, we don't yet crack why the clock spins as fast as it spins. It sits easier on me than a confident answer that turns out to be fancy dress. Same as the grains by the fire all those nights back. Nobody dreamed any of this up for being lovely. It was forced, cornered out of plain facts. A clock on every road and a squaring at the end.
Just so. And nothing in this room was ever prettier than it had to be. So carry that one picture out the door, and next week I name the price. This same spread of clocks hands you a trade you can never win. How sharply the electron sits in a place, set against how sharply it's moving. Sharpen the one and the other blurs, always and forever. The same coin as tonight, struck from tonight's own metal. Uncertainty. But the last word at the door is yours, as it always is. So take the floor, say the night back to me in one breath, and I'll listen close for the single hand pointing to the wrong hour.
Then here it is, all of it, in one breath. I walked in clutching a negative I'd made my peace with, and you told me it was never anything but a clock hand pointing backwards. 1 hour on a dial I'd never been shown. An amplitude is an arrow, a length that squares to the odds, born untouched, and an hour that born can't see but that decides everything the instant two arrows meet. To combine them, you lay them tip to tail and read the arrow home. Same hour, long and bright, opposite hour, a stub and dark, every angle between, its own grade of glow, the fence made exact at last. What turns each hand is the action, that flat path number carried over from the mechanics course, winding a little clock the length of the road as the electron flies. That much is machinery, and I can turn it in my own 2 hands. But here is the part that took my knees clean out from under me. It flies every road there is, moon loops and madness and all, each with its own ticking clock. And nearly every last one cancels its neighbour to silence, so the single patch that lives is the patch where the action goes flat, where the clocks fall into step and sing. which is the classical path. Least action was the little clocks singing together the whole time, and I never once heard it until tonight. I'll be at the door early, and next time, I gather, I learn the full price of all this, that I can pin down where it is or how it's moving, but never, ever the both at once.